What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, January 11th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone. And before we get into it, I was listening to the tail end of Michael Herzog's program just now, where he was pointing out many of the contradictory evidence regarding the history of World War II. And we've talked a little bit about certainly from the economic point of view, Hitler was a very good thing for Germany, and how did we get from there to he's a monster? And Michael posed the question, is what we're being spoon-fed a lie? And the obvious answer to that is yes, given all the lies we've seen exposed recently, Saddam's nuclear weapons and so forth and so on. Prudence demands we re-examine and question everything we have ever been taught in the state-controlled schools or on the corporate media. Because, yeah, Americans are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. So, sounds like Michael's got a good program coming up on that topic. Now, getting on over to the transcript of the testimony of the founder of Fusion GPS, Trump is out there blasting Dianne Feinstein for releasing the transcript without notifying Chuck Grassley that she was going to do so. And a lot of people have come down on her for this, saying, you know, it's wonderful that to see your new commitment to transparency, given that it wasn't there for the IRS scandal and various other things that were going on. So Trump is out there blasting her as sneaky, and saying that Donald Trump appears to care, Feinstein only appears to care about transparency if it's going to help the Democrats. Now, Feinstein made an odd comment. She was asked why she released the Fusion GPS transcripts without informing Grassley, and she said that she was pressured to release the transcript. And then when people pushed her, who pressured you, she backed off, saying, no, I wasn't pressured, and no other comment. So something's going on in the back there. Now, getting into the transcripts that are out there, Glenn Simpson has tried to portray Fusion GPS as disinterested researchers for political clients. And they're trying to say they were completely unbiased and disinterested regarding the Trump dossier and the 2016 election. But apparently buried in Simpson's testimony is showing that at the same time he was trying to get the FBI to investigate Trump, he was actively trying to steer the FBI away from any further investigation of the Clintons. So obviously the word disinterested does not apply. Now, Sean Hannity has come out with a potential blockbuster. Basically, he is saying that he has sources indicating that the dossier used by officials to spy on Donald Trump and associates was paid for either by former FBI Director James Comey or FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Now, we do know, it's been established before, that some $50,000 went from the FBI to pay for Christopher Steele to try and find confirmation for the accusations made in the dossier. Total waste of money. He couldn't find any because there was nothing to find. But if it turns out FBI Director James Comey initiated that payment or McCabe initiated that payment, that's serious, serious business there. So bit by bit, this is starting to unroll. Over at the New York Times, they're actually starting to editorialize that the anti-Trump movement is winding down. In fact, they described it as dying a slow death. And, yeah, it's been a year, a solid year of liberal Democratic tantrums, and I think probably most people are sick of it. Now, Trey Gowdy is out there. Apparently, he's looking into the question of whether Peter Strzok and Lisa Page leaked information to reporters to try and damage Trump before the election. And it's certainly looking that way. Now remember, Strzok and Page were romantically linked. They were romantically involved. They were having an affair. But it turns out they may have been leaking stories to media outlets. The Hill reported that House and Senate panels are examining text messages exchanged between Peter Strzok and lawyer Lisa Page, who exchanged anti-Trump views and texts that were made public last year. And apparently one of the exchanges seems to indicate they knew about the content of a Wall Street Journal article in advance of its actual publication. So that's serious business. Again, a lot of leaking going on. And again, we're still waiting to see what's going to happen regarding Comey, who apparently those memos that he sent to that college professor, who then leaked them to the media, did contain classified information. It's a Title 18 violation right there. We all know what Comey's going to say. I didn't mean to do wrong, and that's going to get me off the hook. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, interestingly enough, there's a memo that was co-authored by former Clinton Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri. And interestingly enough, this memo admits that Democrats need illegal immigrants to win elections, that they're planning on using foreigners to influence the American election outcomes. And basically saying that illegal immigrants brought here at a young age are a critical component for future Democratic Party electoral success. Interestingly enough, Jennifer Palmieri, the co-author, has claimed on numerous occasions that illegal immigrants never vote, and the Democrat support for them has nothing to do with the elections at all. So the truth will out here. Now, you all remember Charles Ortel. He's done a lot of work, very good work, looking at the mechanics of the Clinton Foundation and basically pointing out it's not being run as a charitable foundation. It's being run as a tax dodge and a money laundry. And basically he's out there saying that in any investigation into the Clinton Foundation, it's going to touch many in the U.S. federal government. Now remember, we had this anonymous FBI person was posting on the web a while back saying that, yeah, just about everybody inside the Beltway was using that Clinton Foundation as a slush fund, as a money laundry. And the other day I was saying the reason the entire government is working so hard to shield Hillary Clinton is they're protecting themselves. We've had 30 years of corruption surrounding the Clintons ever since Arkansas. And sooner or later, it touches almost everybody. And they're all scared. If this thing were to unwind completely, a lot of people would be going to jail. A lot more would be losing their career in public life. So Charles Ortel is out there saying, yeah, this spreads wide. A lot of people have their finger in this particular pie, if you will. Now, this next article makes a comment that normally I would not go along with, or rather I would not consider suitable for the program. But the comment was made by Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger has come on out describing the relationship between Steve Bannon and Donald Trump's Jewish family members literally as a war between the Jews and the non-Jews. And Kissinger made the remark to Michael Wolff, apparently when describing White House feuds between Mr. Bannon and Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Now, Kushner was given a prominent role devising a new plan for peace between Israel and Palestinians. That didn't work out very well. And apparently for Trump, giving the Israel problem to Kushner was not only a test, it was a Jewish test to make sure that he really was going to go along with what Israel wanted. So, interesting comment there. A little faction fight going on. Now, Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner have withdrawn their divorce case. They've announced they're going to work things out privately. Their lawyers made the announcement. They were coming up on the first hearing, and all of a sudden they pulled the paperwork. Are they falling back in love? Maybe. Or it may be that under U.S. law, spouses cannot be forced to testify against each other. And I think that's the real motive for withdrawing the divorce case. Because whom is looking at serious legal trouble? So is Anthony. And if they remain legally married, they can't be forced to testify against each other. Meanwhile, Huma Abedin is out here in Hawaii, apparently wanted to just get some relaxed time before things heat up. She's not on this island. She's down on the big island at Kona, over at the Four Seasons Hotel Hualalai on Kona. It's $1,000 a night to stay at that resort. Very, very plush. And apparently she was photographed wearing a big floppy sun hat and sunglasses. She didn't want to be recognized, but apparently she was. Now, the House has passed legislation renewing the NSA surveillance program. Actually, what they renewed was the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and basically it outlines the so-called lawful procedure for collecting foreign intelligence. There was talk about putting in more restrictions on using this to surveil American citizens, but that apparently did not go anywhere. And at this point, it looks like Congress is trying to cut yet another hole in the Fourth Amendment by basically allowing FISA to spy on Americans as long as there is some rationalization that they're talking to foreign interests. We are becoming a police state, no question about it, surveillance state. Now, here's a very interesting story. This actually is a YouTube video of a report about some documents that have been leaked out proving that the whole Black Lives Matter violence was planned, orchestrated, and paid for by George Soros. And a gentleman named Harrison Smith is on the video, and he shows the documents and what they contain. So these are all manufactured groups, Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And as more proof of that, there's a post over at shtfplan.com where somebody went up to some Antifa protesters. We hate fascism. We hate fascism. And the interviewer asked them, can you define what fascism actually is? And he got a lot of blank stares and shrugged shoulders. They don't know what fascism is. They just like to use the word at people they don't like. And eventually the protesters just walked off because they weren't able to deal with the questions. Okay. Robert De Niro, I used to have a lot of respect for him as an actor, and he is a good actor. He's done a lot. But apparently, when he was acting as a presenter, to give Meryl Streep, excuse me, I am ready for this bug to go away. Anyway, Robert De Niro was the presenter for Meryl Streep, gave her the Best Actress Award last Tuesday, and he took to the microphone to launch a rant against President Trump, which included profanities, called him the jerk-off-in-chief, the baby-in-chief, and a blanking fool as part of his warm-up to give the award to Meryl Streep. Now, Robert, you're a good actor. You're not a politician, and you don't know what's going on. I've been involved in studying politics for going on 24 years now, quarter of a century. You haven't. The good news is, the crazier Trump's critics, like Robert De Niro, get, the better they make Trump look. He looks absolutely sane and stable compared to these people. Zen-like calm. And of course, part of the Get Trump agenda is to try and portray him as mentally ill. He's coming down with Alzheimer's because his father had it. He's insane and so forth. Little surprise over there. Apparently, this psychiatrist that has been quoted accusing Trump of being insane, it turns out she doesn't have any current licenses. One of her licenses has lapsed, and the other one was apparently rescinded, and she's applying to reinstate it. But she's not actually practicing right now. She doesn't have a license to practice. So that's what they're using as their authoritative source. Okay, we're going to talk about Julian Assange. A lot is going on with Julian Assange. The other day we had this report that Donald Trump was going to basically wind down, or had already wound down, the 8-year grand jury investigation into WikiLeaks, and basically allow Assange to come home without fear of arrest. And a lot of people were saying Assange would be very foolish to do that because he could come home and wind up in a mysterious car accident or dead in a suburban park or die in a small plane crash. But there's been a new development. Yesterday, late yesterday, somebody started the story that Assange was going to get kicked out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And the corporate media just went into a meltdown over this. It went all over the place, and it turned out to be a fake story. Ecuador issued a statement that Assange can stay there as long as he needs to. Then they took one step further and issued a national ID to Julian Assange. He's now an Ecuadorian citizen, or he has the right to be in Ecuador. I think if I were Assange, I'd probably go to Ecuador rather than back to the United States of America. Now, Vladimir Putin, I guess, has had it up to here with all of these accusations of Russia meddling in the U.S. elections. And again, no proof of that has been found. But Putin decided it was time to basically set the record straight and point out all the times the United States, in particular the Central Intelligence Agency, have willingly interfered in the elections of other countries. It's something they do as part of their regime change program, rig the elections. And Putin is saying that if the United States persists in interfering in other countries' internal affairs, they should expect that these other countries will start interfering in U.S. internal affairs. Tit for tat, sauce for the goose, whatever you're going to have there. Personally, I think everybody ought to mind their own business when it comes to other countries' internal affairs. But you need to realize that since the end of World War II, the Central Intelligence Agency has attempted to change the government of well, they've tried 50 times to change foreign governments. Sometimes they've tried more than once on the same government. And they succeed about half the time. And when they succeed, of course, it's bad for the targeted country. When they fail, there's usually a backlash that is bad for the American people. For example, there was an unsuccessful attempt to change the government of France, which I think may have been the motive for France wanting to trade in all their Federal Reserve notes in exchange for gold under the Bretton Woods Agreement, which led to Nixon having to end gold convertibility. So it's very scary sometimes to see our government and the CIA go on out for a short-term gain and absolutely disregard the potential long-term consequences. And that kind of short-sighted thinking has led to one foreign policy whoopsie after the other, after the other, after the other. A lot of people are still talking about Oprah running in 2020. And I think having all these celebrities wanting to run for president. George Clooney wants to run. Ellen DeGeneres was making words about it. Celebrities as our president, I think, shows how much we have declined as a republic. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And somebody wrote in to remind me that Julian Assange's birth citizenship is actually Australian. So he has even less reason to come back to the United States. But again, a lot of dynamic things happening there. With regard to that little pledge drive that we just had on the last break here, if you would like to support Republic Broadcasting, the address, the postal address to send a check or money order to is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And if you want to phone on in to become a recurring subscriber to the network, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, over in Missouri, their governor, Eric Greitens, is in a little bit of trouble. Apparently, a news report came on out where he was having an extramarital affair back in 2015. And the reason it's become current is because his mistress at the time is accusing him of blackmailing her with a nude photo he'd taken of her, and he was going to apparently just show it all over the place. And the governor is admitting to the affair. He's denying the blackmail because that would be a crime for which he could be prosecuted and kicked out of office. And as we so often see in political families, the governor's wife is standing by his side and saying, we have a wonderful marriage, and all you gossip peddlers, just stay away from us. Remember that DNC fraud lawsuit? This was a lawsuit that was brought down in Florida against Debbie Wasserman Schultz and against the Democratic National Committee on behalf of all the people who donated to the Democratic Party on behalf of Bernie Sanders. They wanted Bernie Sanders to be the candidate. And because the evidence has now come on out that the DNC leadership and Debbie Wasserman Schultz rigged the primaries, tilted the table toward Hillary Clinton, they're feeling it is a case of fraud. Now, the case originally went to court and was thrown out by a Clinton-appointed judge without even looking at it. But then the case was reopened on appeal. And there was an attempt to block that appeal, but a court order from a new judge is saying that, yes, the DNC fraud lawsuit appeal will proceed. So congratulations to these people for fighting as hard as they are, because I think they're right. The political parties are supposed to be part of the system that listens to we the people, not just lines up a bunch of corporate cronies and says, you get to pick one of them, but you can't pick anybody else. That's why the Republicans are so mad with Donald Trump. They didn't pick him. The people did. And even though he's in their party, and even though he's strongly supporting many of the principles of the Republican Party, they're still hanging back. They don't like him. They see him as the enemy because they don't like losing that control. Okay, let's talk about the war zones. A lot of stuff going on out there. Apparently, the Syrian army has launched what they hope will be the final push to capture Abu al-Duhar. And apparently, they're staging all these forces, the Syrian Army, Tiger Forces, National Defense Forces, and they're basically trying to get that air base back from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Al-Qaeda of wherever. So they're really pouring on there. It's only a matter of time. It is only a matter of time. Even with what appears to be continuing covert supplies of arms and ammunition by the United States, this thing is winding down. Now, the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces just released 400 former ISIS fighters just a few weeks after they had been captured. And apparently the released ISIS fighters included well-known ISIS members and commanders. Those were high-value targets. But apparently the Syrian Democratic Forces are allowing some of these released ISIS fighters to join their ranks, which tells you that ISIS was a fraud all along. They're just giving it up, and the same fighters are changing uniforms here. Now, people are starting to look at the consequences of all this Mideast turmoil for China's Belt and Road Initiative. and starting to wonder at what point will China send troops into Syria to calm things down. You have to follow the route they're planning on laying out for that Belt and Road. When it's completed, it's going to be an amazing system of transportation. Goods from China will reach Europe in a third of the time that it takes to send by cargo ship. So China has a definite national interest in that region now. Okay. We're coming up here on another break here. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443, and we will come right back after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Dave in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike, and howdy. I hope you're feeling a little better today.
My energy is starting to come back today. I mean, that was one of the things that this flu did. It just drained us, and we couldn't even get out of our own way. But energy-wise, I'm feeling better today. Claire is still dealing with having twisted her back during a coughing fit. She's actually at the chiropractor's right now.
Oh my God, man! I've been through that too. You know, I'm a truck driver. I mean, we've spoken frequently, so you're aware who I am. I'm Hillary's boy. but man, I did the same thing. I pinched a sciatic nerve. I mean, I'm 50 years old, and I have never really had any major medical issues. I had like a hernia surgery, and a tonsillectomy when I was like 2. Otherwise, I have been physically perfect my whole life, and I'm a rock and roll drummer. I credit that energy and physical exertion as keeping me in shape, because I really don't do anything, to do otherwise. But being a rock and roll drummer in and of itself is great exercise. But I twisted wrong coming out of the truck, and my entire left side, from the hip down. So, I mean, I've been to 3 chiropractors. I finally found a good one who, took the time to x-ray me. And I've been to 3 treatments in the last 3 days. And I think I'm going to be able to get up in the truck tomorrow, and that's cool because we're here in Missouri where we're about to get hit by an ice storm, but I've got a load to deliver in Jacksonville, Florida. And so Amy and I, my wife and I, are going to take off tomorrow morning, hopefully before the ice hits, and get down to Jacksonville Saturday night. And I don't deliver till Monday, so that gives us Sunday to go to Amelia Island State Park, 14 miles of white sandy beach and eat fresh seafood up. It's a terrible life, Mike. It's a terrible life. But my heart goes out to Claire because I understand that physical pain. Now let's get to business, brother.
Okay.
Hey, what Trump did the other day when he brought everybody into the round table on DACA, I thought was brilliant. And I mean, because, suddenly all of the leftist stooges in the press, they're rolled back on their heels because he was in command of the room. He had a very clear agenda. He's willing to negotiate. Okay, the DACA kids, you and I know they're not kids. I mean, maybe 3 of them are, but, we're talking 30. So many of them are adults. And so the whole liberal thing, the kids, the poor kids, that's a joke, but that's how but what he did with that was diffuse the liberals calling him a racist, a megalomaniac thug who just wants to chase off immigrants, blah, blah. So I thought that was a great, brilliant move. And I really haven't heard your take on that.
Well, obviously, pretty much I agree with everything that you're saying about this. And again, earlier in the show, we had this memo that surfaced from inside the Democratic establishment saying that, they're trying to bring all these people up here to vote illegally. And so that's why these DACA children aren't really children. They're voting age. And that's why they're being brought in here.
And not only are they voting age, but they're also fighting age. And so, I mean, we don't even know who's coming in or what agenda that they have. Okay, let's go on to something else. I heard you say something yesterday, and I always listen to your show a day late, and so I feel like a lot of times I'm half retarded when I call you because you already covered this as I listen to the show the next day when I and then I'm thinking, well, that was foolish, but I missed it because I can't listen to you live in many cases.
Yeah.
And so, I catch you a day late like so many people do. And so I apologize that it runs out like that, because I know you're ahead of the game, but I just haven't gotten your take at the point that I get to talk to you, as so many other people do, And so you have to repeat yourself, which God bless you for your patience. I don't know how you do it. But anyway, I heard you say something yesterday, and this was yesterday's show, and it pulled up something in my spirit, because, I am the ultimate. I'm Walmart public enemy number one. I started stand up for Walmart. I have beaten them in many places. They've beaten me in many more. I mean, I've forced Supreme Court cases. We've taken cities to the task. Springfield, Missouri, we almost had them. The first petition ratified to stop the neighborhood market, just domination of the rural economy. First petition ratified in 20 years. What's Walmart do? They hire the former Chief Judge of the Supreme Court. Where we're headed, money wins. And of course, I met Hillary in 1987 in a Walmart board meeting, wanting to put a Made in America department in the supercenters before the supercenters were even in reality. She scared me to death. I told you that story.
Yeah, you did. I remember that.
Yes. Yeah, you said something yesterday, brother, that really caught my attention. And, you've almost been, now I want to say this politely, because, I'm very crass sometimes. I've fought this hard fight a long time, and so I tend to say I'm a hillbilly. I tend to speak what's on my mind. You've always kind of, as I interpreted it, been almost negative toward the idea that we could rebuild our manufacturing base. And yesterday, you made the point to say that, not only do we need to defend our borders, we need to know who's coming in, but we need to reclaim the investment lost and rebuild our manufacturing base. Do you really believe that's even possible? And that's not a trick question, because I don't know that it is. I don't know that we have the labor for it. I don't know that our people have the work ethic for it. I don't know that, the education has been completely corrupted. I don't know that we could actually pull that off. Do you actually think America could reclaim its position as the manufacturer of choice for the world?
Well, I don't know about the manufacturer of choice for the world, and I don't know that it can be done under the current government. But so many things would have to be happening at the same time. Along with building the factories, we have to train the labor force, we have to overhaul education so it gets back to reading, writing, and arithmetic instead of liberal philosophy indoctrination. But sooner or later, this nation has to rebuild its manufacturing, or it's just going to collapse and rot away. That's just the reality. You can't run a nation without manufacturing or growing products that you sell to other countries.
No, that's a fact, and that's always been my agenda, because, I live in rural Missouri, where we used to have factories that produced what was sold in our local stores, all locally owned. You remember that.
I do.
These days don't have any. Yeah, the kids these days have no work ethic, and that's been engineered. So how do you take a lazy generation that's been taught to, cry until you get your check from the government, and tell them that, no, you need to actually work and be a productive member of society, contributing to the tax base and to your local economy, to your hometown, so that you have a vital civilization. It almost seems to me like we've gone so far down this dark path, thanks to Bill, Hillary Clinton, George, the first and the second, Obama, all these thieves and thugs, for Walmart profits. It just makes me crazy. I think what they have done is destroyed the work ethic of the soul of America, to the point that these kids aren't going to work if they can get a free check, and they're not even kids, they're adults. And how many of them even want to work? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and a big part of the problem, unfortunately, is that our pop culture has tended to portray working people as socially inferior. And so kids growing up, they say, oh, I don't want to be a plumber. I don't want to be a carpenter. Wow, they're not going to let me into the disco if I'm wearing a a plumber's hat or anything. They all want to grow up to be movie and TV stars, which everybody flirts with that when they're growing up. And they're being brought up to admire politicians and the very wealthy, and they'd like to be that. They don't know how to get there in most cases.
There's no pathway for them. Yeah, there's no pathway to that. And I love what you had to say yesterday about Hollywood. I mean, what are they doing? Just trying to cover their bases? I mean, you know, that whole farce at that show the other night where Oprah got up there and to me made a fool of herself. Give me a break. I mean,
yeah.
You know, there's hundreds of pictures of her, you know, with her tongue in Weinstein's ear. Come on. I mean, you know, but these people, they somehow. And you know, what I really think is that the more atrocious that this gets, and it's obnoxious insanity, more people just have to repel and eventually come to the realization that, you know, you're all a bunch of liars and thieves and pedophiles, whatever you are. You are not serving the interest of our children, of our middle class, of my hometown. My downtown is dead. There's no jobs in my hometown. You know, my kids, they go to college. They got to go to Burger King for a job or a door greeter at Walmart. You know, so to me, the more atrocious that they get, the more people are going to have to repel, because the less appetizing it is for the masses. I mean, that's my prayer. But I've always been surprised by how many stupid people there are out there, as witnessed by the Walmart checkout lines every Black Friday or Sunday after church. You know, don't get me started. But anyway, I love you, Mike, and I just wanted to call you and wish you a good day, and Claire, and I'm praying for both your health, and I want to extend my love to your audience, and challenge everybody. Come on now, this is about the future. It's about your children. Are they going to work? Are they going to be able to be productive in society, or are they going to just be a drain on society? You're looking for their Obama phone or their free Nikes or whatever Oprah's going to give them. Come on. We're Americans. We work. That's how we did this. That's how we're going to do it in the future, or it's not going to happen. And God bless you, Mike.
Well, very well said, very well spoken. You're absolutely right. And in so many ways, it seems like the image of what it means to be an American has decayed. You know, everybody's focused on getting that free stuff or getting that check or getting that money. And along the way, we've abandoned a lot of the other values that really were the best part of being an American, the American character. And that was altruism, pride in workmanship, just for the good workmanship. And it's a very different society than from when I was young, and yes, I was growing up in farm country, but when I was younger, people who knew how to do farming, because it's not as easy as you think, they were looked up to and respected. Anybody who was productive was looked up to and respected. People who were trying to live off...
That's the sad thing, Mike. To me, that's the sad thing, because these kids these days will never know the value of going home knowing you worked hard, did a good job, you did your best. Mm-hmm. That in and of itself is its own reward beyond the paycheck. Just knowing that you applied yourself, you did it, you showed up, you worked hard, you did a great job, you contributed. Dude, you wear that when you go home. These kids these days will never know that, because they're not going to feel, one, they don't have the opportunity that used to exist in this country to do so, and two, they don't even care to know, because they've never been taught that there is a value in work. Work, yes, in and of itself, a good job, a good day's work, a good job done during that day, in and of itself is a blessing to your soul. You go home feeling better about yourself than you do carrying your EBT card into Walmart.
Well, there's a point there I was trying to make before in my previous speech here. When I was a kid, people who worked, had jobs, were looked up to. They were considered socially superior. Yeah. And I come from a family that's pretty much working class family. One uncle worked in a foundry, another one was a carpenter, and another one was a plumber, and the rest were all various forms of farming and dairy work. There were very, very few people who were on government assistance, and they were looked down on.
Right.
They were an object of shame.
But now, you know, this liberal ideology has elevated everybody to one position, reducing or somehow equal those people who are only consumers of the produce. It's so ass backward, pardon my French. The kids these days who didn't know different, how are you supposed to teach them? I mean, they're already ingrained in laziness. Their handout. You're going to get them up and tell them you're going to work in a factory for no. I mean, so to me, this liberal ideology, and I, you know, to me, it's not even liberal. It's a globalist ideology that wanted to destroy the working spirit of the American middle class, and have done such an effective job over the last 30 years. Again, thank you, Bill and Hillary. Thank you, George the first and the second, and Obama, and all these thieves. Thank you so much for this globalist destruction of the American work ethic, which is what this country was built upon, and we can't reclaim our former glory until it's reestablished. But we have a polluted generation now who only knows about the free Obama phone and whatever Oprah wants to give them, and all the lies and nonsense.
Or the Reagan cheese.
Cards.
Yeah, it is, and I think a good description for all of this is we're in the bread and circuses phase of the decline of the American empire.
We are. We are.
Vote this party, get free stuff. You know, go watch the football games. That's the modern equivalent of the gladiatorial combat, and it's another reason why I think. Well,
how about that new Star Wars movie, Mike? Come on, I mean, you know.
I haven't seen it. We don't go to movie theaters anymore.
The distractions, the lack of reality, the lack of importance on being productive, you know, which we all grew up to, you and I. I mean, our generation. And all those generations that preceded, whenever you were expected to get up at dawn and go out and milk the cow, you were expected to help in the field. You were expected to help clean the house. That's what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't just lay there. You didn't just lay there eating McNuggets until you were 400 pounds at 14 years old, and then riding a cart around Walmart. You know, and getting a government card to do so. It's mind blowing. So my thing is, I don't know that we can come back from this, Mike. I'm really concerned. I mean, I raised a hardworking man, but so many people don't care to even teach children, and so many adults these days were never taught.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And I'm going to vote Democrat. You know, plus all the other immigrant terrorists that they can bring in to do so. I don't know, man. I mean, it's just it's discouraging looking from the outside in.
Okay, Dave.
I love you.
Dave, I'm sorry. We got to do a commercial break. I got to let you go. I gave you a lot of airtime, but you do speak very well, and you raised some very important points. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and I have a couple of comments in response to Dave. The first is the fact that we have seen over the last couple of decades the small mom-and-pop entrepreneurial businesses in a neighborhood fall victim to the giant big-box stores. And the reason is simply that the big-box stores, through sheer volume, are able to obtain product at a lower price. What we're facing now, though, is the big-box stores are in serious, serious trouble. And they're starting to collapse. And if one collapses where you are, all the businesses you used to go to, they're going to have to be restarted, and that's going to take a lot of time. Having lots and lots of little businesses is a safety mechanism. If this little shop goes out of business, there's still commerce going on. If everything's focused on this giant big box and it goes away, then all of a sudden people in the neighborhood, they can't find what they need to buy. We're already starting to go through that here in Hawaii. Where a lot of retail outlets have shut down. Now there's rumors we may lose our both our Sears and Sam's Club is starting to shut down stores. So the other issue, of course, is the free stuff. Somebody wrote in expressing their ire, what free stuff do kids get? Well, if they're on food stamps, they're getting help with that, all kinds of other subsidies. The problem with the welfare state is that sooner or later you're going to run out of money because we don't have manufacturing, because nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Right now, the trade imbalance across our borders is $1.5 billion every single day, and that is simply not sustainable. Getting on back to the war zones here, Russia is blaming Turkey for that multiple drone attack on their base. They dropped hints the U.S. was ultimately responsible, in part because a U.S. spy plane was spotted over the base when the attack was taking place. But apparently Russia thinks that it did come from Turkey. We don't know what's going to happen as a result of that. Israel appears to be flexing its muscles in Syria. Aircraft, ground-to-ground missile attacks on targets near Damascus. It's a mark of Israel's heightened concern that Assad is coming very close to winning this civil war, which wasn't really a civil war. It was an attempted coup d'etat. And part of it may just be that Israel is trying to show that it's still relevant in the region. Because the fact that the U.S. and Israel have failed in Syria, it diminishes both of them. So we'll see if the U.S. tries some desperate gamble or Israel tries some desperate gamble to get this thing going again. But by any reasonable measure, the U.S. has suffered a defeat in Syria. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I just finished responding to an email from somebody living in Washington State, basically saying that not everybody on EBT is lazy. No, there aren't. There are genuinely people who need help, and I have no problem with that at all. I think the issue that Dave was trying to raise are those people who prefer living on welfare, EBT, handouts, whatever, rather than getting a job. And I was mentioning to this gentleman who wrote me that I saw a lot of this when I lived in Los Angeles. And when we moved to Washington State briefly, Claire and I lived there, it was very refreshing to see, because the Washingtonians do have, overall, a good work ethic. And they reminded me so much of family and friends that I knew when I was growing up in New Hampshire. So I hope he understands that what Dave and I are concerned about are people who prefer to live on handouts as opposed to accomplishing, going to a job. There are some other factors we need to keep in mind, and that is that work has to be very rewarding. First of all, monetarily. Got to have a decent wage and salary if you're going to buy a home and build for the future. It's got to be rewarding emotionally. You've got to feel good about yourself being there. Those are two factors that are definitely missing in the current labor market. There are so many surplus employees that managers are just treating them badly. That's working against it. And the other aspect of it is that there is so much siphoning of wealth out of the public, both by the government through taxation and through corporate CEOs who are earning salaries and bonuses way out of line with corporate leadership in other countries. There's a tremendous wealth inequality here. And after a while, people working in an environment like that, they're going to get discouraged. They're working hard. They're not seeing their own life improve from it. They're only seeing the lives of the bosses improve from it. And that's going to drag anybody down. That was another factor that led to the eventual demise of the Soviet Union, where it was all communistic. No matter what you worked or what you did, this was what you earned. And after a while, people just get tired and say, I'm tired of this. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Oh, Steve Elkins is on the line. Steve, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, excellent show. The comments your last caller made about the truck driver, about this youth not having work ethic, a lot of it I believe is true. they don't. I mean, some of these kids in the high school or by my high school are driving nicer cars than I have, but that's a parent not being a parent and being more of a buddy and giving them what they want, not being a good parent. But we also, at the same time, have a problem with our government. These kids who do want to have some get some work ethic, or the government's discouraging it by making you get permits for cutting grass or
selling
shoveling
lemonade.
Snow. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Here these kids want to get work ethic. You and I probably did this. I did this. I shoveled snow in the winter, and I cut a lot of grass in the summertime, and it was great. And then I worked into the food chain as far as fast food for a little while, good work ethic while you're going to school. But and you establish that, and then you work up from that. But, you know, when they're trying to take these kids and shake them down and a permit to cut grass in your neighborhood, that's crazy. It's crazy stuff.
It absolutely is. And it's not just government. Many, many years ago, I actually taught remedial math at a Southern California high school. And there were some students hanging around who wanted to learn more than was being taught in the regular math class. Now, this is back in the heyday of the slide rule, which tells you how long ago this happened. And so I just sort of pulled together this little lunch club. These kids would come in during the lunch break. They'd bring their lunch with them, and I would teach them how to use the slide rule. And we got shut down by the administration because the policy, even all the way back then, was to give everybody an equal mandated education. And so the kids who wanted to excel were being discouraged. And I thought that was very destructive back then. And that's why I didn't stay in that particular job. I love the kids. I couldn't deal with the administration.
And he was worried that this generation is not going to know the feeling to own a home. Yeah, a lot of them will, actually. You know, they're going to graduate college, not be able to get jobs, still live at mom and dad's house in the basement. They're just going to wait for mom and dad to kick off, and then they'll inherit the house. So,
well, yeah, that's probably a good thing to do. Okay, Steve, anything else?
That's it. Oh, no, I did have one question on the. I've read both pro and con on Amazon buying up Target. It sounds like it wouldn't really boost their economic profile more than about 10, 15%, and then some say they think that it's going to happen because they're going to challenge Walmart at some point in time and trying to kind of monopolize this whole retail market. Just kind of throwing that your way. What do you think the direction they'll go?
Well, I think Amazon is probably going to acquire Target just to show some growth. And, yeah, there's going to be a war between Amazon and Walmart. But Walmart is apparently starting to get into order online and delivery. So they're both crossing over into each other's area. And, again, I'd like to see more companies out there competing, because competition is always good for bringing down prices and driving up quality of product. But if we come down to just one giant national retailer, then, as we've seen in the past before, prices will go up, quality will go down, and the attitude will be, we're going to sell you what it is best for us to sell you, and you should be happy with that.
Yeah, agree. Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call, and we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And then we're going to go right on back to the phones to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Aloha.
Tell you what, it's interesting you mentioned about some of those big box stores or whatever that are shutting down and so forth. And prior to that, a lot of mom and pop entrepreneurial shops have had to close because of that, because people want things cheap, they want in big bulk and whatever have you, which in a way is not bad. At the same time, it's certainly not helping, especially considering that what a lot of the big box stores have is primarily plastic in one way, shape, or form. It has no substance at all, except for a tantalizing moment where you plug it in and play it and it's shot in under a week. But I think what people don't realize is that when they basically allow the smaller stores that tend to be more specialized in this, that, or whatever have you, and they allow those to go down the toilet, as it were, and close down, they're basically shooting themselves in the foot.
Yes.
Because they are losing an expertise in a given shop mercantile of what those folks had to offer.
You're losing the knowledge that the salesman has of the product, or the shop owner.
Bingo.
And we used to have a small computer shop locally, Personal Touch Computers, and the guy who owned it and ran it was very smart and knew all about computers and knew how to fix them. And you could go on in there and discuss a problem, and you could get an answer. You go into someplace like Best Buy, and the salespeople there can point you to a product, but if you're asking anything technical, they're clueless, except for the Geek Squad people.
Well, they basically have the deer in the headlight expression on their face, and they have no idea, period. So, but yeah, if people start complaining about, oh, this place is closed down, that place is closed down, well, guess who caused it? Take a look in the mirror and look at what you let go of and didn't bother to support that was around you locally, for that matter.
Yes.
So, in a way, I really have no empathy for such folks because they had it right there at them, and they decided to go for something cheap and big and flashy. So, anyway.
Well, right now here in Hawaii, there's actually a big push to stimulate more small, locally owned businesses. There's been a media campaign to use the locally owned supermarkets because they're sourcing their produce from right here in Hawaii, which means you're less exposed to chemicals and the possibility of GMO. And they do this every once in a while. Back when Claire and I were still doing radio commercials, we got involved with their Buy Hawaii program. And I agree. It might be a good idea for people all over the country to start thinking about stimulating the small local businesses as insurance because so many of these big box retailers have gotten into financial trouble. And we're hearing about massive closing. Walmart is closing stores, Sam's Clubs, Sears. They're all closing their stores. And if we're going to keep the basic necessities available, we have to start supporting our small local businessmen. And yes, it's going to cost us more, and that's not an easy thing in these hard economic times. But if we're all forced to be dependent on this one big giant store and it goes away, then we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing that got me annoyed as far as Wally World goes, and just a quick thought for you. Here in the Southeast, if they go to install a supercenter, as it would be called, they wouldn't use a building that another big box store had used and had transferred to another location or whatever the case might be. They would actually go and have the land cleared and have a whole new, brand spanking new building built instead of reusing or, shall we say, oh God, what's the terminology? Recycling a previous building, refurbishing it where they could actually have the business there. And for one thing, when you go into a Wally World anyway, it looks like a blooming warehouse. It doesn't look like a regular store to start with. At least the last one I went into looked more like a warehouse with a concrete floor.
Same thing with the Sam's Club. Same thing with Costco.
Well,
that's the model, the warehouse store.
Well, it's absolutely, I guess in a sense, unless you're prone to dropping glass on the floor, which this day and time you'd be lucky to come across a glass container in a store like that or a shop or whatever, you don't have to worry about it breaking on a concrete floor. So, but it's just gotten to be cold, impersonal, ridiculous, and not worth going into.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, and of course there's hardly any staff there. And that's a big part of the retail experience is being able to talk to somebody about what the product does, what warranties are on it. But I've gone into some of these stores around here lately. You just walk around, you can never find anybody. They've all been let go. The model is, go on in, find what you need for yourself, pay for it, and go home.
It's gotten terrible. Y'all have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Francis. We're going to let you go and switch over to Art, who's living off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. It's been quite a while since we spoke. It's interesting. I saw that article this morning about Costco, about Sam's Clubs. Certain Sam's Clubs are closing down. And,
yes.
And, we've heard talk of, I just left Missouri and moved back here to take care of my mom, who's elderly, and she's turned off real bad sick. And when I was there in Missouri, I was actually watching as the local J.C. Penney's and Sears and everybody was, and the Big Lots, all of them were talking about, well, Big Lots closed up, Sears was closing up, J.C. Penney was talking about closing up, and I'm seeing this going on all around the country now.
Yeah.
And I'm back here, and now we're hearing about Sam's Clubs closing down after Walmart informed their hourly employees that they're going to be getting pay raises, and all this stuff's going on. And then we're hearing about Walmart, certain Walmarts around the country closing up. And I'm already hearing people, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to get this? How am I going to get that? Well, wait a minute. How did you get it before Walmart became Walmart? You used to go down to your local hardware store and buy nails, didn't you? Well, here's what you do. If you've gotten used to going to Walmart, for example, I got out in Missouri, you can get root beer. It's actual alcoholic root beer. You can buy it from Walmart. Well, here in the state that I'm in now, I'm back in Georgia. Walmart doesn't sell this kind of stuff. So I went to my local liquor store. Folks, this is how you do it. You want to put these big corporate people on check. You want to put them in check. You want to take back your economy. Here's what you do. You go to your local places. Like I went to the local liquor store here, and I said, look, here's what I want. Can you get it? It took them about a week, and now I have someone who can supply me what I want. This is how you do it. Just start going to your local places. Like you said, Mike, yeah, you might pay $1 more or 50 cents more or whatever, but look at it like this. That money, and I've been fighting Walmart for, 20 years I've been fighting these people. You're going to keep, when you use your local mom and pops, your local hardware store, your local farm and feed store, whatever, you're going to keep your money local. You're going to keep it in your own county. It's not going to go some international corporate yahoo who lives who the hell knows where, doing who the hell knows what. Keep your money local, because that extra 50 cents that you're paying for that product is 50 cents more in your local economy. People, this is not rocket science. Let's let this happen. Let these big corporations close down their stores. Good for our local economies.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. And at least when it comes to our produce, I mean, some stores are getting the message. Down at the local Safeway, they have a section of the produce section that is set aside for produce grown right here in Hawaii, and Claire and I always head there.
Yeah. So that's better for your economy. I mean, let's shut these people down. Good for the local economy, bad for the global corporations.
Yes. I mean, the more integrated, the more global these corporations become, the less efficient they are. It really is, you're right. These corporations are sucking wealth out of remote areas and bringing it to themselves and having a lot of fun with it, and that helps to unbalance the economy. Anyway, Art, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and good luck with your root beer. And getting on back to the news, we were talking about Israel has been carrying out all kinds of attacks near Damascus. And what they do is they fly over Lebanon without Lebanon's permission, I might add, and they will launch their attacks into Syria from Lebanon, and thinking that Syria is not going to fire back because Syria doesn't want to hit Lebanon. And they're doing it as much as anything to prove they're still relevant. Because, again, as I was saying before we took all the phone calls, the reality is that Israel and the United States have met defeat in Syria. They don't want to admit it. The U.S. doesn't want to admit that they can't do anything in Afghanistan. because the instant they admit they have lost any of these wars, the enthusiasm for any more wars will evaporate. Now, speaking of more wars, very interesting up in Germany. Apparently, Germany is one of very few countries where people under 18 can enlist in the military. And right now, there are more than 2,000 soldiers under the age of 18 serving in the Bundeswehr. Now, of course, we all know the stories about child soldiers in World War II. We know all the horror stories of child soldiers in various other parts of the world. We're talking really small kids. But apparently this is the deal over in Germany, and it almost makes you wonder if they think war is coming as well. Now, the tiff with Pakistan is continuing to heat up, and Pakistan has declared that the United States are no longer, they're not allies anymore. And it is a big deal for a couple of reasons. The first is that Pakistan is spinning toward China. And after this commercial break, I'll tell you the second big deal. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about Pakistan, and all of this kicked off by Donald Trump, who basically said Pakistan's been lying to us about their fight against terrorism, and this was followed by slashing funds going to Pakistan. It's a war of words. It's escalating. Pakistan is now saying that because the United States is not acting like an ally anymore, they are not allies anymore, and the indications are Pakistan is going to pivot closer to China. In fact, right after Donald Trump cut the funds, reduced the funds to Pakistan, Pakistan and China entered an agreement for direct economic trade using the yuan. So Pakistan is now trading with the yuan instead of the dollar. And this pivot to China, that's one consequence of this policy. The other one is actually a little more immediate. One of the key NATO supply routes by which NATO basically gets into Afghanistan runs through, key NATO supply route through Pakistan. And right now it's closed. And Pakistan is saying that to reopen that route, they want $365 million more a year. So the numbers are going back and forth. It feels to me like on top of all the other wars the United States has started all over the globe over the last 17 years, that for some reason they're poking Pakistan. And they're going to come on in and say, war on terror, Pakistan is a hotbed of terrorists. They took our money and allowed the terrorists to set up camp there. Because one thing the United States really cannot afford much longer are all these countries who are pivoting toward China and Russia. This agenda is actually not working out. The more the United States does, the more it drives other countries away from the American sphere of influence and more toward Russia and China. Now, oddly enough, we're getting word that Donald Trump is expected to preserve the Iran nuclear deal. And apparently, Trump is angry at Congress that it didn't take the October decertification of the P5+1 nuclear deal to vote the deal down. And then there was the speculation Trump would simply unilaterally withdraw the U.S. from the pact this time. Officials are saying that's not expected to be the case, and President Trump will again sign a waiver to keep the sanctions relief from the P5+1 deal in place, subsequently meaning the U.S. will not be violating the pact. So things are quieting down over in Iran as well. Maybe somebody somewhere in Washington, D.C. is understanding we're overextended militarily. We're overextended economically. Continuing on this path will bring this country crashing down. Now, Russia and France have both slammed the United States over this emergency UN meeting on Iran. basically talking about the protests that were going on in Iran and the means by which Iran was trying to control the more violent of the protesters. And the U.S. said, human rights violation, called this emergency meeting. And France and Russia are both saying, look, this is internal matters, or at least Iran's response to the protests are internal, and it's really not the job of the UN Security Council to intercede. And they basically reminded the United States that the United Nations didn't hold any emergency meetings after the U.S. crackdowns in Ferguson or against Occupy Wall Street. But at this point, it looks like the attempt at a coup in Iran, like it did in 2009, has failed. The Iranian sources are reporting the more violent protests have tapered off. There are still protests over the economic conditions, but those economic conditions, the high unemployment, the hardship, it's all the result of U.S. economic warfare against Iran. The U.S. has gone out to other nations and arm-twisted them to not do business with Iran. And that's why they have 13% overall unemployment and a 40% inflation rate, which actually compared to what we have in the United States is not all that bad. But they are ramping up that pressure and trying to find some way they can bring it down. But this coup d'etat, this fizzled. And I think one of the reasons they are more and more tending to not work out is because around the world more and more people understand this is how the United States plays this game. You go on in, find the discontented among the population. Every society has people who are not happy with what's going on, and you fan them up. You encourage them. You support them financially. And you send agent provocateurs in there to rise the level. You take it violent. You create this momentum, this feedback loop that basically carries it forward until the government will fall. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. The Lady Claire is home. I'm going to go check on how she's doing, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And apparently Russia has now reversed its earlier claim and is now saying that Turkey was not behind the drone attack onto Russia's base in Syria. They say they know who it is. At this point, they're not identifying it. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here, and Keith Rogers, fellow RBN host, is on the line here. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I got a question for you, then I got a statement. Mike, you told your audience before that in lieu of cell phones and stuff, that when you take a photo or a video, that it's actually embedded within the information of the video and or photo, the device and stuff which was used to take it, as well as its probably GPS information and stuff. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think I remember that. You're talking about cell phone cameras.
Okay. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So my reference is how the U.S. is now, what do you call it in a polite way, saying pissing off Afghanistan with that latest video of the U.S. soldiers, plural, driving by that Afghanistan driver there, and they shoot through the window and kill the driver, and Afghanistan was really upset with that.
Yeah, I can understand why they would be upset.
Right, and of course, they, you know, again, this is the U.S. kind of deflating its own bubble, not only in the Middle East itself, but also Afghanistan and Pakistan now. But with that same premise, though, why couldn't the U.S., because it seems like Russia lately, when the latest released video where this jihadist was doing one of his type of videos, that an airstrike was called in, and he was killed on the spot, and another guy had his arms blown off like that. But the point is, though, is if the so-called war on terror was correct like that, why couldn't these people be targeted because of all the information that's being sent out on their phones and stuff, as well as the ability to be able to listen to these phones and stuff, like over with the GCHQ, how they have the biggest Middle East monitoring system, that they would know exactly where all these phones and stuff are being broadcasting from due to GPS location.
Well, first of all, if somebody takes a photo or video with a cell phone and doesn't send it out, if instead they transfer it to a computer, there are available tools where you can strip out all that identifying information. Then you simply post it on a jihadi bulletin board, and the video is out there, and there's no back trail.
Okay.
I mean, even Photoshop, the data for JPEG image is called EXIF, and it's where it was shot, all sorts of information, camera information and everything. But in Facebook, you can just delete all of that, just strip it right off.
Okay. Well, anyway, the important thing was the way that the Afghan government, who the United States has been basically supporting for all these years, is now giving a backlash now from what the U.S. troops are doing over there. And what I thought at the time, though, was this was done in the field as they were driving like that, and so another soldier had been recording this, and so I was wondering if the U.S. was scrambling to try to find out whose phone that came from.
I imagine they probably are, but the damage is already done. The cat is out of the bag. This is not going to sit well with Afghanistan. This could even trigger a renewed push to get the U.S. out of that country.
Well, that reminds me of the Stryker team, if you remember them, that Matt Talby had written about up there, where they were killing Afghan kids just for fun.
Yes. Yeah.
So, anyway, that's all I had there. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that the U.S. seems to be losing its allies across the planet there.
It is.
And it just, Anyway, I just want to say that and give Claire my best, okay?
I certainly will. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Yeah, this current war regime, it's been going on for 17 years. It is failing. And the more the U.S. tries to grab other countries, the more countries are pivoting away toward Asia, toward China, toward Russia. The U.S. right now basically has itself and the NATO nations, but even the NATO nations are getting tired of some of this stuff. Now, getting on down to Israel, there's been another incident at one of the illegal settlements, Yitzhar, where armed Jewish settlers were attacking Palestinians. And apparently they were being protected by Israeli soldiers. So it looks like Netanyahu is definitely escalating his confrontation with the Palestinians. And that also extends out to sea. As you know, Israel limits how far out Gaza fishing boats can go from the shore of Gaza in order to limit how much fish they can catch. And apparently, if you're on the wrong side of what is often a very arbitrary line, you can get into trouble. So apparently Tuesday morning, Israeli gunboats opened fire on 2 fishing boats. And they were 5 nautical miles from the coast of northern Gaza and 1 mile from the Israel-Gaza maritime boundary. So technically they're in waters they're allowed to be in, but the Israeli forces shot up the boats and detained 6 fishermen, including 2 children. And 2 of those detained were featured in a photo story for the Electronic Intifada last October about the annual crab catch. Maybe that's why they were targeted. But again, Israel's behaving very, very badly, and if you comment on it, ooh, you're a dirty, filthy, Jew-hating anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and cast Jewish babies in the ovens. But resistance inside Israel is continuing to grow. And apparently a group of 63 high school students from all across Israel wrote and signed a letter to Netanyahu saying they refuse to serve in the IDF and they are very much opposed to the continuing occupation of Palestine. See, what Israel is doing, it's all about the leadership. It's all about those few corrupt individuals at the top. And it does not necessarily reflect what the Israeli people are thinking. Same thing applies to us. What the United States is doing around the world are the results of those who are in power. and don't reflect the feelings of the American people. That's why we have to be very careful and very selective when we hand out criticism, and we avoid that broad paintbrush approach. Now, interestingly enough, the Most Reverend Timothy P. Broglio, he's the U.S. Catholic bishop, wrote a letter to Secretary of State Tillerson requesting that the U.S. keep its embassy in Tel Aviv and not move it, and goes on to say, I urge you to seek a diplomatic solution that respects the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians and promotes a just peace. Pardon me. So, what we may be seeing is a new voting bloc emerge. And that is basically Christians who are not Christian Zionists. And this whole Jerusalem thing could very easily become a factor in 2020. Now, getting on over to North Korea, it does sound like things are settling down. They're talking. They had a conversation over the hotline. Now they've met in person. Apparently, it's going very, very well. And North Korea has once again reiterated that its ballistic missiles and its nuclear weapons only target the United States. They are not aimed at Russia. They're not aimed at China. They're not even aimed at South Korea. They're not aimed at Japan. So Kim Jong-un is absolutely correct to reframe this confrontation as what it really is, the U.S. butting its head in where it is not wanted. What's really interesting is as the two Koreas are talking and walking back the idea of war, media pundits, they almost seem disappointed. Oh, gosh darn, this is a bad thing. We were looking forward to mushroom clouds and all the rest of it. Actually, the real concern here is that it is less a case of North Korea coming to South Korea and more a case of South Korea wanting to move closer to North Korea. Remember, South Korea's president, Moon Jae-in, is very much in favor of the Sunshine Policy, which is the Korean program for reintegrating the new Korea, the two Koreas. Tear out the DMZ, get rid of all the landmines, establish transit. North Korea has resources, South Korea has the factories. It would be a boom time over there. And I hope these talks continue along that line. And I hope both Koreas understand that the only reason they've remained separated all this time is because of U.S. interference in their internal affairs. Now, one of the positive results of all these talks is that North Korea will be sending athletes to compete in the Olympic Games next month. And they're also sending along their female cheerleaders. And this is actually a very famous group. They're very beautiful. They've got very good choreography. They're called the Army of Beauties in South Korea. And the North Korean women are going to be sent down there to help cheer their athletes along in the Olympic Games, which is kind of weird. I don't recall seeing cheerleaders at Olympic Games, but then I haven't watched the Olympics in a long time. Okay, we have these, boy, the Navy has so many problems with their littoral combat ships. I can understand why they're just abandoning them and want to start all over again. But apparently the U.S. Navy's newest littoral combat ship, the article didn't even name it, it's just hull number 9, was unveiled by shipyard workers in a snow-covered ribbon-cutting ceremony up in a port in Canada. And it was supposed to have gotten to Florida by now, but it's still stuck in Canada. And apparently there is so much ice and so much snow, it's overwhelmed the tugboats. And they can't get enough tugboats to come on over and get them out. The ship is not considered critical shipping, as opposed to things like food and other supplies. Speaking of cold, as you know, California is dealing with some horrendous mudslides. First they had the wildfires. Almost feel sorry for California. First they had the wildfires, now they're having the mudslides. Because of the cold, the mudslides are ice cold. People who are getting stuck in the mud, they're getting hypothermia. They're getting hypothermia. And to top it all off, Jerry Brown says the state's heading into a new recession. Now, apparently, there's been another mysterious explosion over Russia. And apparently a lot of people thought the Americans are attacking, the Ukrainians are attacking, but apparently it may have been yet another meteor. And they do seem to have a lot of them come down over Russia, but then look at how large Russia is. There do seem to be a lot more rocks falling out of the skies these days. And again, you need to understand that as the solar system orbits within the Milky Way galaxy, it's also bobbing up and down. And when it bobs through the center part, there's a lot more debris there. And so a lot more junk is coming in from outside our solar system, like that asteroid a few weeks ago, where they determined it definitely came from outside the solar system. So let's talk about the economic news now. Pardon me. Kodak has decided to launch a cryptocurrency venture, and shares of Eastman Kodak were soaring with that announcement. And apparently Kodak has a licensing partnership with When Digital to launch an image rights management platform called Kodak One and a photocentric cryptocurrency called Kodak Coin. So they're getting on in there. I hope they do a better job than they did getting into digital cameras. A little bit of history for you photography buffs. And by the way, if you ever get anywhere near Rochester, New York, take the tour of the Eastman Mansion. It is an amazing place, and they've got case after case of antique cameras. Kodak built its fortune on the film camera. The original one was you'd buy the camera, you'd shoot up the film inside, you'd send the whole camera into Kodak. They'd process the film, print the pictures, and send it back to you with another one of these box cameras. That's where they started. And, of course, they've been a major name in Kodak. They did film stock for Hollywood. They were a little late getting into the digital camera field. They really thought people were going to stick with film. Nobody's going to go with these newfangled digital cameras. And there is still a small market out there for Kodak film, but they got into the digital revolution very late, and the first camera they launched was really very, very poorly designed, and that's why there are no more Kodak digital cameras out there. Okay. Apparently there is a new egress of Russian billionaires, and they're all heading to Malta. More than 730 of Russia's biggest businessmen have applied for Maltese citizenship. Now, Malta has a very interesting immigration law. You can buy your citizenship in Malta, no questions asked, for just 900,000 euros. And Malta is a tax haven. A lot of money gets parked in Malta. It's a small island, a lot of stuff going on there. Got a really good movie studio there as well. And basically, if you go to the website of Malta's government, they actually have the list of citizens. And you can see who's going on down there. But apparently these Russian billionaires are getting out of town, which I think in the long run might be good for Russia. Fewer oligarchs, basically, is what's going on here. Now, as I mentioned to one of the callers earlier, Sam's Club is closing stores down across the U.S. No notice given. It's actually going to start actually today. It started today. The next time you go to Sam's Club, it may be closed with no warning. That would certainly be a problem for Claire and I, because the only other big box store it would be a Costco, and that's actually quite a long drive away from us. So we'll go back to shopping at the local markets and stuff. But it is another indicator that our economy is not doing well. People don't have money to buy all the consumer goods that are out there. So I believe we're coming up on a commercial. There should be some music. I'm not hearing the music. Oh, there it is. All right, we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's talk about what's going on over in Europe right now. There is a growing furor, if you will, over the Brexit issue. And it has been sparked by Tony Blair and his associates coming on in and saying, we're going to find a way to stop this. And that is not sitting very well with the British people. And apparently Blair and his backers are literally launching a campaign very soon. And it's basically all these Europhiles, including ex-EU Commissioner Peter Mandelson. They're going to be all over the media saying, you know, stay with Europe, stay, you know, we're working toward the New World Order. But it's having a real rough reception over there. Meanwhile, a petition has been started through London's version of the White House online petition site, which no longer exists, by the way. But they have one in London. And if you get over 100,000 signatures, you force a debate in the Commons over the issue at hand. And the petition that has already gone over the limit, number of required signatures, basically says, forget Brexit talks, just quit. Just quit the European Union immediately. And apparently this issue will be debated in Parliament's Westminster Hall Annex on the 22nd of this month. Now, over in Austria, their Chancellery Minister, Gernot Blumel, is saying, we won't pay any more because this potential for Britain leaving is basically creating an EU budget shortfall. And Brussels is already out there telling the member states, you're going to have to cough up more money. We need more money. And up until the Brexit, Great Britain and Germany carried the lion's share of the load. And a lot of that money was siphoned off to prop up European Union member states that are in serious economic trouble. And so some of these countries are getting really tired of this. And it looks like Austria may be seriously rethinking being part of the European Union. Over in Germany, apparently they're once again in coalition talks. Merkel says there are still big obstacles. They're down to the crunch. Apparently one thing she's going to try and do is start the talks and not let anybody leave until there's a resolution, no matter how late into the night or next morning it goes. That could backfire on her quite a bit. The big obstacle, of course, is the immigration policy. Merkel is still standing firm on her open borders position, and the other governments, the other political parties that she's approaching to form a coalition government are Eurosceptic, closed border parties representing the German people who are just fed up with this refugee nonsense. They want it to stop. The people have clearly spoken here. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's get in talking about computers here, because there's still this ongoing debate about encryption and about privacy and the ramifications for the Fourth Amendment. And apparently the FBI is on the warpath against encryption. The claim is they can't properly investigate criminals. I admit it's a bit of a problem. I know that it is possible to write very powerful encryption. We did it with our NSA challenge. And I did the NSA challenge to prove that real criminals and terrorists are immune from the FBI, CIA, and NSA. And so all this spying and all this getting rid of encryption, it's targeting ordinary, everyday, law-abiding American citizens. But apparently the FBI is back on the warpath. They want to outlaw investigation, encryption, or they want to mandate what encryption you are allowed to use. Now, for a lot of people, they have reasons to hide what they're doing from the government, not because they're committing a crime. And the example I keep going back to is the Asia-Pacific Economic Conference that was held up in Seattle, Washington. This was all the way back in the 1990s, but it was a big stink in the local papers, never made the national news. It basically came on out that U.S. government agents, including FBI, were hacking into the computers of conference attendees to steal business secrets, how much was going to be bid on a contract, other information like that, that was then forwarded over to Bill Clinton's cronies to give them an advantage in negotiation. Now, obviously, that's industrial espionage. It's illegal. It's got nothing to do with law enforcement or fighting terror. But, yes, the government will do that. And I'm sure all of us have got photographs of ourselves and our significant others in embarrassing states that they want to keep private. Don't want people at the TSA pouring through them. I think one of the NSA whistleblowers came on out and said that the NSA data center in Utah is just filled with all the private porn that's been stolen from Americans' computers. So, once again, this puts us all at risk, and I think nothing illustrates that better than this brouhaha over these so-called bugs built right into all of these different CPU chips. Because it doesn't feel like a bug to me. A bug is something that happens once. Or there's a bug in the code. This, I think, was a government-mandated backdoor. And somebody discovered it. And the ramifications of this are absolutely huge for the ordinary American. Now, first and foremost, because of the patches, they're losing the back door. That's going to be gone. But the patches are causing all kinds of problems on computers. It's slowing them down. Apparently, the iPhone will take a 40% performance hit because of these patches. Now, the cloud server giants are starting to talk about simply dumping Intel product after the Spectre and Meltdown chip flaws have been found, and just completely replace the equipment. And this has actually impacted us here at whatreallyhappened.com, because I got notified today by my hosting company that they are going to be replacing all of their servers to new ones without the Intel chips. And so at some point in the very near future, whatreallyhappened.com is going to be offline for about 3 to 5 days. I still don't have the fine details when it's going to happen, but it's something you need to be aware of. We will be taken offline for a while. The good news is we're going to be on a much more powerful, much faster server, and so that's a good thing. So getting on back here to iPhone, the slowdown is primarily, for some reason, in the execution of JavaScript. But again, think about all the people who just bought the new iPhone 7 or the iPhone 8 or, heaven forbid, the iPhone 10 for $1,000. And all of a sudden, they're going to be getting maybe 2/3 of the performance they paid for. I think there ought to be a class action lawsuit by everybody in America impacted by this against Intel. You owe us money. You went and wrecked our device. And these Intel chips are in so many different pieces of electronics, it's actually very hard to find something that doesn't have one of these chips. And so everybody's being hit. Everything with a computer. The whole internet, the whole cyberspace is going to be slowing down because of this. And we're already lagging behind the rest of the world. This is a real disaster. All right, we're going to take a quick moment to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about computers. We're talking about the implications of these, what I think are backdoors in these various central processing unit chips, and how it really is going to have a serious negative impact on computing as a whole. If you're using an application that does a lot of number crunching, you're going to take a hit. If I were still doing commercial computer animation at this shop, it's cutting my rendering speed by 1/3. And that means it takes 1.5 times as long to do a rendered sequence. Now, yes, I can go out and buy a second machine, but that's hardly a solution. We're still hearing a lot of things coming out from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and there's been a lot of interesting things out there. They've had some problems with some of the products, but there's a big stink being raised about robot pole dancers. And it's provoked a little bit of outrage from women who are saying it's the ultimate objectification. And they denounce these robot strippers, even though they don't actually strip. They're just there dancing. And a lot of it, people are starting to talk about, you know, the rise of the sex robots, which appears to be a growing trend among that class of people who can actually afford something like that, just casually. I mean, it's a lot of money. So, a lot of concerns. A lot of people are worried, how are the sex robots going to impact society? And we're already seeing these stories about men who bought a sex robot and they're perfectly happy. And I saw another article about how women have become so politicized and liberalized and confrontive that maybe men just don't want to deal with them anymore, and hence the flocking over to the sex robot. I read a statistic recently showing that women are actually watching a lot more porn than they used to, which may mean that they didn't score a hot date on Saturday night. But society is definitely going to change because of these machines. I can imagine somebody might want to use the pole dancing robots as an advertising gimmick. I can't see any other reason to have one. Now then, apparently Twitter is being sued by Charles Johnson. He's an alt-right publisher, and basically he got shut down by Twitter, and he's declared it has caused him damages on several fronts. And he's got a lawyer, Robert Barnes of Barnes Law, and they're bringing action against Twitter. And among other relief, they want a declaratory judgment that Twitter has violated and continues to violate free speech rights under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and or Article 1, Section 2 of the California Constitution. And so I want to cheer this guy on here because these corporate social media companies are getting a little bit too big for their britches. And they're being turned, obviously, into government-controlled filters. They want only nice conversations on Twitter. And all of these filters and everything, they mostly seem to target conservative writers, conservative blogs. Isn't it amazing how the liberals will always come on out and demand that they be allowed to speak their mind no matter where they are, but for everybody else, it's free speech zones and Twitter filters. Here's a very bizarre story. And I'm trying to figure this one out. I may just throw this one out to the listeners and say, can you make any sense of this? Basically, there is a campaign backed by George Soros and Richard Branson that is out there trying to tell people, don't call illegal drug users junkies or crackheads, okay, because it's stigmatizing them. Well, yeah. George Soros and Richard Branson's suggestion is that they should be called a person who uses drugs. Now, this is all being backed by Richard Branson and apparently former liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg. They're out there saying drug users are they're victims of discrimination. You know, not all discrimination is bad. There are certain forms of discrimination that are really forms of self-preservation. We had a problem here where we live, I guess going on 4 years ago now, where we had drug users, drug sellers, literally in both of our neighboring units. And the crime was high. Our Nissan got its spare tires stolen. Things were being broken into. There's a reason illegal drug users are stigmatized and shunned, because they bring with them other issues, such as high crime and the possibility that the young people living in this area can be lured into drug use. So I don't know what they think they're doing. Are they getting ready for global legalization of all illicit drugs? Are they going to make money on it? Is Soros and Branson all of a sudden getting into the heroin and the meth business? I find it puzzling. It just doesn't really seem to make much sense. Okay, over in the world of medicine, apparently there's been a major breakthrough at Duke University in North Carolina, and they were able to grow working human muscle tissue from stem cells. Now, stem cells, of course, are a very primitive form of cell. When the egg is first fertilized, that's what you get, is this little object called a stem. And as it grows and divides, the cells will specialize. And you can go from all kinds of cells, bone, muscle, nerve tissue, eyes, ears, nose, lips. And once a cell is specialized, you can't turn it back. But in this case, they were able to take a stem cell, and they were able to turn it into working human muscle. This opens the door to being able to help people who have lost significant portions of their muscle in an accident and get them back. Okay, we've got some callers waiting on the line here. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yeah, I got a couple points. One, as far as Amazon, the thing that makes it irresistible to me is it tells you everything. Let's say you want to buy umbrellas, which I did recently. I wanted to buy umbrellas. Well, it does all this research for you. It tells you all the it shows pictures of the little thing, you know, from different angles. It's almost like going to a store yourself and looking at the umbrellas, and it tells you all the pros and cons of each and every possible umbrella you might want to buy, the high-end ones, the low-end ones. You know, so it gives you all this information. You're never going to get that if you go to any store. You'll have people, you might find somebody that will talk to you, and he may or may not know what's going on. So
yeah, that's one of the reasons Amazon is a success. eBay does the same thing. When you're looking at an item to bid on, it's got multiple pictures from many different angles and a description of what it is and what it does.
I wanted to say something about this guy, Harvey Weinstein.
Yes.
Yeah, I never heard the name until a few months ago when they had all this storm and fury about Harvey Weinstein. Everybody had to pronounce his name correctly, although I can't see why it's Dianne Feinstein and Harvey Weinstein. It's the same word. It's a German word for a beer mug, right? Steen or Stein. Mm-hmm. But anyway, let's call him Harvey Weinstein. For one thing, after all this talk, I don't see these being charged with any crimes. I don't think he did anything illegal.
Well, I haven't gone through all of the allegations from the women. I don't know that there's one of a forcible rape, but it is a very disgusting behavior. And what's even more disgusting is to see all these Hollywood luminaries who, over the last several years, have done a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Everybody knew it was going on, and now they're all in high dudgeon saying, yes, this is terrible. We're going to wear black at the Golden Globes. We're going to make speeches about this. And I think it's actually given the public a bit of a bad taste for Hollywood in general, especially because following Oprah Winfrey's 9-minute speech at the Golden Globes, photos of her have surfaced being all buddy-buddy with Harvey Weinstein. So
they're all hypocrites.
Yeah, they're all hypocrites. They're basically trying to make it look like they're doing something about the issue, but in point of fact, nothing will be done. And I say that because there have been times in Hollywood's past where the sexual abuse of people breaks out into the open. And every time there's always a lot of moralizing and we must do better, and then things just go back to the way they were before. And part of the problem is because there are so many people trying to get acting jobs, they're perfectly willing to go along with sexual demands.
This guy, I'd never heard of him before. I'm not a big movie fan, but recently I saw one of his movies there on Netflix, Harvey Weinstein.
Yes.
And it was a great movie. It was about this. It was a documentary about the drug, whatever the name of the drug was. It was mainly in England. A lot of people got hurt where they had shriveled up arms, birth defects.
Yeah. Thalidomide.
Right. And that was a great movie. It was a good documentary, and it showed how they. One thing about these people, they didn't feel sorry for themselves. They were born with these little shriveled up arms. They went ahead and lived their life. It's all they could do. And some of them apparently learned to use their feet to grab stuff. There's one picture of this girl, some footage of this girl. They had a party for these people when they won their small amount of money.
Well, I mean, it's from their point of view, it's just the way. From their point of view, it's just the way things have always been. Obviously, because I did work in Hollywood, I know who Harvey Weinstein is. And yes, over the years, he's produced quite a few wonderful movies. But that still, I don't think, excuses that kind of behavior that we're seeing. But it does go on. It was going on when I was working there. They're going to make a big show of trying to reform themselves, but it won't change. It'll just go back to the way it was right there. Okay, Don, I need to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. And we're going to go to Roxanne in Texas. Aloha, Roxanne. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
Hi. I just wanted to mention on YouTube, you can go to type in Dr. Eric, B-E-R-G. He's talking about sciatica for Claire.
Yeah, well, her issue is not sciatica.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, she got back from the chiropractor. She seems to be doing kind of okay, but I can't talk with her about what happened until after the radio show is over.
I see. Yeah. Okay, well then skip that then, because it's a real great exercise for, like, you could help her with if it was sciatica. But okay, then I'll just toss that.
All right.
Thank
Well, thanks an awful lot. I appreciate the thought. I really do. But apparently Claire had a really good experience with this chiropractor. I got a good feeling from him as opposed to the one she used to see. But apparently it's going to be a while before this is properly taken care of. All right, back to the phones here. Dave in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, brother, I had to come back. Thank you, Roxanne, for that tip on sciatica, because I actually am suffering for that. My email is David.
No, please don't put your email out on the air. Dave, please don't do that because you invite harassment.
Any relief? Okay, Mike. Okay, you said something in response to our last conversation that prompted me to call you back.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I don't do this very often. I don't do this. But what you said was important. What?
Okay, we're going to have to take a commercial break. Dave, I'm sorry. Stay on the line. I got to put you on hold. We got to do a commercial break. I'll come right back to you. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Dave in Missouri. And Dave, can you just sort of continue where you left off?
I mean, your song, We Will Not Go Down. Unfortunately, we already have. And this is just a reply to your comment after our last conversation on this show. I am not a grandstand, right? I don't do this because I want attention. What I have done my whole life is try to serve the interests of my hometown, the middle class, working families, the people who I grew up with. And, we were never made in China oriented, right? We used to be made in America. And so what you said in response to our conversation when you come back from the break, I'm trying to stay up with you real time, brother. It's hard on me. I hope you get that. But I love you. And so I'm trying to stay up. So what you said was, the big box retailers, they killed everybody local.
Yes.
And now they're going down. And it's going to take time to get local competition, local businesses, local manufacturing. This is not okay. So let's take this back a step, because too many people don't understand the supply chain. So you have to first have the resources. That means you have to mine the product. You have to develop the product. You have to engineer it. You have to develop it. You have to manufacture it. Then you have to distribute it. Well, what has happened with these big box retailers. And Mike, this is the only reason I called back is because I felt like you didn't belabor this point enough. What happened with these big box retailers was they purchased American politicians who then outsource all our resources with our technologies, right? China didn't know how to produce the widgets in 1989, in 1994. They didn't know that. The Clinton regime, the George, the Bush, you understand. So what people don't understand is that it took 200 years to develop your hometown, your downtown, which is now Sarajevo Light. Why? Because Walmart has destroyed your local economy because they purchased politicians on both political parties to offshore our 200 years of our genius in production.
Well, I talk about this all the time. I talk about this all the time, and I lay the blame.
I know.
Dave, let me talk. Dave, gotta let me talk. Okay. This all goes back to the end of World War II and Harvard Business School, which, because those were boom times, the United States was the only country whose industrial base was intact, so the rest of the world was coming to us for products as they rebuilt their civilizations. And business was growing so fast, they had to keep the skilled workers on the floor because they couldn't find any new skilled workers. So they needed to find an alternate source for managers. And Harvard Business School came up with scientific management, which was a unified set of practices that could be applied, they thought, to any business, and they had a degree program to go with it, the Masters in Business Administration. And what they inadvertently did is they created a generation of managers that don't emotionally connect to that manufacturing or agricultural process. It's beneath them.
Okay, where I differ from you is it was not inadvertent. These Rockefeller-funded organizations knew all along. They are traders. They have always been about maximizing return for themselves on the labor of others. That's all they've ever been about. So, we've got two classes of people in this world. We have the working families who, are honest, who, if your car breaks down at their farm, they're going to help you out, and we have the banker class. Now, the banker class is an entirely different entity. It didn't used to be because my grandpa was a banker. He has 40 years never foreclosed on a piece of property or repossessed an automobile until the regulators ran him out of the business. But, the banking entity from New York, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Rothschild arm. I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
No, you're not. You're belaboring the point here. Again, we have to draw that line between your mom and pop depositor type bank, which is a useful item for community, and I think that's probably
gone, brother.
Yeah. No, we still have depositor banks, but we have to remember that private central bank is really at the root of all of this cash drain
of all evil.
Okay,
absolutely. So if you can, let me make one small
seconds.
point. So, okay, I don't think we can do it, brother. And I have spent my life trying, but at this point, the way they have polluted our working class, the way they polluted the generations, I just don't believe that it's possible in a generation or two to come back from the decimation they have reaped on us for the profit of the Waltons, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds.
Okay, Dave, we're out of time. I gave you a lot of airtime today. I'm going to have to let you go. We'll be back with America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, first off, I just wanted to comment that SpaceX, this disaster, is just more proof that we never went to the moon. 2 shuttles explode, SpaceX explodes. It's a hard case to make, Mike, that we went there 3 times error-free. Number 2,
okay, hang on, Rick. Rick.
Yeah, I'm going to hang up and you can comment, okay? I'm going to Harvey Weinstein. This whole all these people that are walking away from their jobs because some women pointed a finger at them, they all know who the mafia is, and I'm almost sure that Al Franken had to have been threatened to walk away from his job. He didn't even say boo. He spends 11 months out of the year campaigning and getting reelected. He just walks away. I think there's more dangerous forces involved here. Thanks for my call. Let's talk offline.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the call, Rick. Obviously, there's a lot more going on in the background than we are seeing behind things like Al Franken and Harvey Weinstein. In the case of Al Franken, in the case of actually more than a few of these, I think the idea is that they're aware there is something worse out there, and if they stay in office, it'll come out. And by leaving office, basically that puts an end to the story right there. So I'm Weinsteined out. Like I said, everybody knew it was going on back when I worked in the film industry. Let's get a couple of new stories in here. Over in the town of Hutchinson, Kansas, there's been a very strange incident, deadly incident, actually not in the town itself, but a resident of the town, Tyler Miller, 51 years old, was driving on a mountain road in the Kaonohi National Forest in Arizona on his way to a spiritual retreat when he lost control of his truck and he hit a large rock. And all of a sudden, things are getting very, very fuzzy. Now, because it was a national park, federal land, the FBI was called on in. And the story is that a forest ranger showed up to help and just apparently shot this guy dead. And the family and friends are stunned. Apparently, it was a female forest ranger. The FBI admits that Miller was not armed, and saying that all they know about the incident is that Miller got out of his car and the officer opened fire. More prescription antidepressants, maybe. This is a little bit weird. Health Canada has just issued a warning not to eat laundry pods. Those little pods, you throw them in a washing machine, they're full of soap, they do, you close it. I mean, was this really necessary? I mean, if I were Canadian, I would be feeling very insulted right now that Health Canada thinks I don't know it's a bad idea to put soap in my mouth. This is Big Daddy government gone completely wacko and crazy at this point. Getting out to California, those Montecito mudslides apparently are considered biblical in terms of the disaster. There are people who are missing. They're trying to find them. Searchers are out there. Rescuers are out there trying to dig out places where people might have survived here. And apparently this was a classic case of warnings that were ignored because the masses of soil that became the mudslide had been a source of concern for quite some time. And now there's a shouting match going on where the residents of the town where the mudslide hit are screaming the government should have done something, and the government's coming back and said, we did. We said, you know, this is a warning. You should do something like maybe, you know, build a retaining wall or move. But I saw one photo of a section of California freeway up there completely filled with mud. It looked like a river. So this was a bad one. This was a very, very bad one. Speaking of California, they're out there trying to figure out what's going to happen now that marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, and on the assumption that Jeff Sessions is not able to intrude into what is essentially a states' right issue. But somebody did a study and said if marijuana was fully legalized across all 50 states, there would be 782,000 jobs required to harvest and transport and prepare the marijuana, 1.1 million jobs by 2025. Basically, they're looking at a total marketplace of $130 billion. That's a lot of money on the line. And that is why the alcohol and tobacco companies were so opposed to marijuana legalization. Because people who are doing marijuana, they tend not to do tobacco, they tend not to do alcohol. They don't work well in combination. So that is really a huge amount of money. Now, there's been a little bit of an upset again in California. Apparently, 3 days before Christmas, 10 days before California's legal retail marijuana was allowed, California Highway Patrol officers pulled over the truck of a locally licensed marijuana distributor and just seized it. 1,800 pounds that was supposed to be processed through the existing legal marijuana structure for medical marijuana users. Was supposed to be processed at the factory, given the traceable barcodes, sample tested and everything. And the CHP just, for some reason, just 10 days before it was totally legal, they just seized it. Now, this is getting a little bit weird. Apparently, State Representative Steve Alford, this is in Kansas, came on out with a very questionable remark on the issue of legalizing marijuana. He came on out and said that black people can't handle marijuana because of genetics. Now, I have not heard anything that bizarre since the movie Reefer Madness. And it's frightening that this guy is actually in a state legislature passing laws. Now, as you know, one of the riders that was attached to the recent tax cut law basically is a provision opening up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to commercial oil drilling. A lot of environmentalists are very upset about that, but apparently they're already up there getting ready to go. And Chevron apparently already has a drilling site in the refuge that was set up secretly. So they knew that this was actually going to happen. Talking about the Zuma Spy satellite, the other day there was a SpaceX launch and nobody was really sure where the satellite went. They have now confirmed that the satellite did fall into the Indian Ocean after failing to separate from the rocket's second stage. SpaceX and the government are pointing fingers at each other, saying it's actually your fault. Our part of the system worked correctly, so we'll see what's going to happen with that. Apparently, the satellite was $1 billion satellite, so was obviously able to do a lot of interesting things up there. Apparently, the James Webb Space Telescope has passed a significant series of tests, and that's good news because it failed the last one. Basically, this is a test of what conditions are going to be like during launch and in space. They put it in a giant vacuum chamber on a shaker table, and they shake it to simulate the vibration of the launch, and the telescope came through with flying colors. This is an $8 billion telescope. Supposedly, it'll be launched early summer of 2019. And they have made sure that it's properly in focus, unlike the Hubble. And it's a very interesting design because the main mirror is actually folded up to fit inside the launch container. And then when the Webb telescope gets out to its orbit, which is actually going to be quite far out from the Earth, they'll not be able to reach it with any shuttles to repair it if something goes wrong. The mirrors literally unfold and lock into place. And it's an ambitious design. It's a very ambitious design. And engineers are confident it will be able to capture starlight in focus and track astronomical targets. So they're getting ready to go with that. And good for NASA. It's nice to be back in the space business instead of being Al Gore's sales staff. Now, here is a weird story. Well, it's not really weird, but it's interesting. And it's going to remind us that the gap between human minds and animal minds isn't as great as some people like to imagine. Apparently, documentary filmmakers discovered orangutans. They filmed them chewing the certain plants into a lather, which they then applied to their bodies as an ointment. And apparently the same plant is used by the indigenous humans in that same forest. So apparently orangutans understand the idea of medicine, of medicinal herbs and how to use them. And that is really quite stunning. Okay. Rand Paul is announcing a plan to overhaul the FISA spying program. Apparently he was on Fox Business with Kennedy talking about the FISA spying program. It does need restrictions and protections for the American people. We know certainly it was being used for political purposes. Right after Trump won the election, they started spying on him. They were probably spying on him before the election as well. But for some reason, for whatever reason, they spied on Trump after the election. Maybe they're trying to figure out some way they could get him to step down from the inauguration. But there's a lot of skullduggery going on out there. And I think one of the reasons the Founding Fathers worked so hard to create a weak, constrained, powerless central government is the knowledge that when a government can do something, inevitably it will. When it can spy on all the people, inevitably it will. Okay, apparently Sarah Carter is confirming that, yes, the Clinton-funded Russian dossier was used by the FBI to obtain those FISA warrants on the Trump campaign. That is significant. That is very, very significant. It was a hatchet job, plain and simple. Now, the FISA warrants are invalidated. Anything they collected under those warrants is inadmissible in court, but then they weren't building a court case. They were simply intelligence gathering. This just gets stinkier and stinkier and stinkier. Apparently, Michael Wolff was interviewed on The View and was taken to task by Meghan McCain for apparently quoting in his book a private conversation that was supposed to have been off the record. And apparently the conversation took place between late Fox CEO Roger Ailes and former chief strategist Steve Bannon. And the conversation took place at this off-the-record dinner that took place in Wolff's home. And so Meghan basically goes after him saying, you set up a dinner, you tell them it's off the record, and then you quote them out publicly. And Wolff said, yeah, well, once Ailes was dead, the off-the-record source died with the source. And Meghan came back and said, you know, this is why people hate journalists. And again, through long years of my own experience, there really is no such thing as off the record. Okay. Apparently, Shepard Smith has angered quite a few people because apparently he incorrectly fact-checked President Trump after the press conferences earlier, basically going from, well, he's still pushing the Russia collusion story. And he's trying to use the indictments to say, see, there's evidence of Russian collusion. There isn't. The indictments have nothing to do with the Russian collusion. Papadopoulos and Flynn pleaded guilty to process crimes, lying to FBI agents. And in Michael Flynn, it's obvious at this point, he was entrapped by Peter Strzok during a friendly conversation. But Shepard Smith is still out there saying, oh yes, it proves what's going on, the Russian collusion. They're still out there pushing that. We have to push back. We have to push back. When you meet anybody, when you're interacting with anybody online, and they're saying the Russian collusion, say, show me the evidence. Where is the proof? I saw another video of Tucker Carlson going after one of these liberal mouthpieces who was just going on Russia collusion, Russia collusion. And Tucker Carlson kept hitting that point. Where is the evidence? Where is the proof? And finally, this other spokesperson was saying, well, there's proof, but we can't show it to you. It's just as good as non-existent. If you can't show us the proof, there is no proof. Don't sit there and say, we have proof, but we can't show you, just take our word for it. Nobody with more than a single-digit IQ is going to take the word of anybody in corporate media or government right now. It's gotten that bad here. Over at Jack in the Box, apparently their CEO has decided it's time to swap cashiers out for robots due to the minimum wage increase. And I imagine if they mean cashiers, it's going to look like a little ATM. You pick what you want off the screen, you slide your card, and it's brought to you, who knows, by another robot. I cannot tell you what a bad idea this is, this rush to automation. It may look good on paper, just like outsourcing, when it first started, looked good on paper. The first few companies that did it showed profits. But with everybody doing it, we've reached this situation where so many people are out of work, and people who are working have so little money that we're seeing these major retail outlets collapse. This is only going to make the problem worse. Because if you let people go from all these jobs and you replace them with robots, these people will not have the money to go back into those stores. Those robots are going to be sitting there idle. We have, for the economy to work, there have to be jobs for people where they can make a decent living and pump that money back into the economy. I won't use a robot automated checkout. They're starting to show up around here. Home Depot has them. Sam's Club has them. I won't use them. I absolutely will not. We've got to keep America working. And getting on back to that phone call we had earlier in the show, we have to restore a positive image for people who work. We have to make them into cultural heroes again, instead of looking down on them. That's the wrong lesson to send to young people. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of the program today. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about this flu crisis, and it really is starting to look like one as well. As I mentioned before, over in Great Britain, there are so many sick people. The health service there has actually put all non-emergency care on hold until at least next month, because people are just pouring on into the hospitals from this illness. And, of course, it's giving critics of the health service an opportunity to say, see, this is the problem with socialized medicine. It always winds up shortchanging people, blah, 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 blah. But it turns out there's a double whammy here. Apparently, there's not just one nasty flu going around. There are two. The first one surfaced in Australia. It's called the Aussie flu. But apparently there was a second nasty flu that came out of Japan, and that more than likely is the one that Claire and I got, because we have a lot more people flying back and forth from Hawaii to Japan than we do to Australia. So once again, I urge you all, don't be brave, don't be a hero. If you start to get ill, get to your care provider. Stay home from work. Don't infect other people with this, because it's going to be nasty. Now, somebody went out on the subject of supplements. We all know about supplements. You go to Down to Earth or GNC or these other stores, and you get supplements, vitamins and supplements. And generally, the orthodox medical industrial complex likes to ridicule them. You know, it's patent medicine. It doesn't do anything. It's a waste of money. You should come on in here and use what we're selling here. But somebody actually went out and surveyed doctors as to what supplements they themselves are actually taking. These obviously being people who would have the knowledge to understand whether the supplements are beneficial or not. And apparently turmeric is understood to protect against arthritis, heart disease, and some cancers. Doctors said vitamin D was very, very important to maintain healthy bones, which I used to hear that when I was a kid. Taking a probiotic was very, very important. Omega-3, and always to eat just ordinary, real food. This is coming from a survey of doctors. Okay, now, apparently there is now an issue here regarding Medicaid and so-called work requirements. And apparently this is something that they tried up in Maine, where they tied availability of Medicare with having some kind of job, and apparently Trump is all of a sudden thinking this is going to be a really, really good idea. And basically it's saying get a job or be a volunteer someplace. Well, the problem with that is some people on Medicaid can't work. Some people on Medicaid are taking care of other people on Medicaid and can't work. I think it's got to be polished a little bit more. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, probably with the Lady Claire. And stay tuned for John Stedmiller's program. He's got a lot of stuff to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it everywhere that you know. We're still in this fight of the truth against the liars. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.